Hello everyone. Thank you for joining me today. The first thing we need to do is read through the poem. You'll notice that the title, Captain Coach, sets the tone for the extended metaphor that is carried through from the title to the final couplet. So here it is. Captain Coach. I remember when you played Aussie rules. Everyone said you were a West Coast champion, but I wouldn't know. I couldn't watch because I was afraid you'd be hurt. I remember one day you came home on crutches. I was so shocked to discover you were not invincible. I ran through the fence to Hasey's house and stayed there until you stopped hobbling around like an ordinary man. I remember all the best and fairest trophies you received. We only brought them out when Grandma came to stay. She was shocked to discover them gathering dust in a cardboard box amongst the junk in the shed. I remember when you came to Lincoln for Mortlock Shield and you met my boyfriend after the match. He thought you were a giant standing on top of the mound, replaying the match with your mates, and you were. I remember I wrote about you for the topic My Hero. In my eyes, you are always head and shoulders above other mortals. For me, you will always be the best and fairest who ever strode the earth. You taught us to play this game of life fairly, to play by the rules and respect our opposition. You taught us the meaning of reliability and decency, the importance of practice and preparation if we wanted to kick some goals in this life. I remember you were our captain coach. Yes, you taught us to drop kick and handball, but you taught us so much more. You taught us to work hard and play hard. If you drop the ball, chase it. If you fall, get up again. That was the way you lived. That was the way you died, chasing the ball, refusing to let the team down. Yes, Dad, you are still our captain coach. When our season is over, we hope they will say we made our captain coach as proud as he made us. No doubt you noticed how the sporting vocabulary reinforced the extended metaphor, comparing the father to the captain coach of an Aussie rules team. By the way, that was my father proudly leading his team onto the oval, and my little brother equally proudly pictured as a footballer for a fancy dress party. Okay, back to the extended metaphor. Words and phrases are dotted throughout the poem like champion, best and fairest, shield, the mound, the match, and hero, which is so typically associated with our sporting greats in Australia. And life is compared to a game with rules and attempts to kick some goals, and of course terms like drop kick and handball and seasons, all combine to build this picture of the speaker's father as a captain coach. In this case, the speaker of the poem is the poet, me. But that is not always the case. We can write from the perspective of any character, so be aware that the speaker of a poem is not always the poet. You may like to pause the video here and check out some of the poetic techniques I've identified on this slide. The second and most important thing I'd like to focus on now is the way you, as a poet, can take your poem from a personal perspective to a universal one that any reader can relate to and reflect upon. The use of the first person pronoun flags the fact that this poem is based on personal experience, and the apposition of I and you emphasizes the relationship between the father and the speaker. By beginning almost every stanza with the anaphora, I remember, the poet reinforces the idea that the speaker is looking back with the perspective of an adult reflecting on their childhood through the lens of greater maturity and experience. However, every adult may reflect on their childhood experience, so in that sense, the subject is universal Moreover, the reader will be subconsciously making comparisons between their childhood and the speaker's, and, in the case of older readers, comparing their perspective of parenting with that being presented in the poem. In this way, a personal experience engages the reader in the universal experience of being raised by parents and shaped by their attitudes and values. If you have a look at the final couplet on this poem, you can see that it reinforces this idea when the speaker shows their expectation that the father has instilled good values by example. By abruptly moving to a couplet, the poet intensifies the focus on this message as it stands alone at the end. Another thing to note is that although it is about childhood and the speaker shows a childlike hero worship of her father, reinforced through the hyperbolic language of Greek mythology and the best and fairest sporting metaphor, the free verse form indicates that it is a serious commentary on the role of the parent, not something trivial or light-hearted. When you, as the poet, are able to engage the reader in making comparisons between your experience and their experience, something much deeper than a personal recollection is taking place. When the reader is being challenged to formulate their own views on the subject, the poem has crossed over from the personal to the universal. I've attempted to demonstrate this visually here, showing the four people involved: poet, speaker, reader, and the focus person for all three, the father or captain coach. All three become entangled as they reflect on the universal elements of the poem which connect them, even though their particular personal experience and perspectives may differ. So, what are the universal elements of this poem? As we have already noted, we all have a childhood to reflect upon. We have parents or guardians being an example to us. As children, we often naively put our parents on a pedestal, and at some point we have to face the fact that they are merely vulnerable humans, not invincible superheroes. This poem will also take many readers back to their first love and the awkwardness of introducing them to their father. And there is the father as teacher and role model, and the child as learner, accepting the challenges of building the skills they need. So you can see there are many points of connection between the poet's experience and the reader's. In the 6th stanza, the poem begins to take a turn to the bigger picture that explores the kinds of values we learn from our parents. Yes, this is a personal reflection about this parent's values, but the corollary is that all parents are a role model to their children, and their children are imbibing, or sometimes even rejecting, the values that are being conveyed to them. From here to the end of the poem, the poet reinforces the metaphor of their father as their life coach, pushing the poem way beyond the personal to questioning the reader's ideas of the role of the parent. The reader is indirectly invited to compare the speaker of the poem's experience with the values their own parents instilled in them. Though it is a celebratory poem, it is written in free verse to capture the serious message of the passing on from parent to child of values that will enable a child to negotiate life with strength and a sense of purpose. That is a universal message, though it is conveyed through an extended metaphor of the father as captain coach based on a very personal experience. In short, a poem that begins with a personal event, experience, relationship, challenge, or observation can be amplified into a universal message of value to a wide range of readers. Now I'd like to have a quick look at a short and very different poem that can reinforce this idea of a poem moving from the personal to the universal experience, giving your readers ideas they can relate to and reflect upon. This poem is entitled Black and White Portrait. It was written in response to a visual stimulus supplied by a poet running a webinar I attended during COVID. The picture was a dramatic black and white portrait of a girl sitting on the floor, draped in hessian and surrounded by red rose petals. The petals were the only colour in an otherwise black and white study. It was interesting to hear some of the other attendees' responses. We only had 5 minutes to write our poem, and most people viewed the girl with sympathy, as someone isolated and melancholy, which was the effect intended by the photographer. This took their personal response to a broader commentary on the pervasiveness of loneliness and isolation in society. My perspective was very different, but also took the personal response into the area of the universal, challenging the reader to confront the materialism and media manipulation that dominates our nation. I don't have a copy of the original photo. The photo I chose is an example of one taken by me to create sympathy for the woman sitting alone watching the sunset. The reality is, she may be perfectly happy and delighted to be watching the sunset, but the way I have taken it and changed the colour to black and white and reduced her to an outline to give the impression of feeling empty influences the way the observer perceives it. Whether poet or photographer, you have the power to impact whoever is confronted with your art. Here is my response to this very personal experience of capturing the thoughts and emotions aroused by this portrait. Black and white portrait. Convey the feeling of this photograph, the poet said. You have 5 minutes. The girl sat elegantly on the floor, carefully composed, facing away from the camera. Her dark hair fell in soft curls down her slender spine. All was still. The fashionably gaunt girl, the rose petals placed strategically around the floor, her figure draped in the hessian of hardship. Stripped of all colour, the image delivered its dramatic monologue, its unspoken desolation. But I felt nothing. I was only aware of the photographer's effort to manipulate me. All I saw was fake feeling, fake posturing, fake experience, fake identity. A portrait of our century. So you can see my response was to be repulsed by the fakery of the pose. I was irritated by the attempt to evoke sympathy for someone who was presented as lonely and only had a piece of hessian to clothe herself, but who was really a well-paid model in an expensive studio, pretending to be someone she is not and being paid lavishly for it. It is something that is happening every day in the media, and especially on social media, where fakery has become an art form that is handsomely rewarded without giving any thought to the way truth is being corrupted in the process. Both of these poems have used conversational language, free verse, different types of repetition, such as anaphora and parallelism, alliteration and assonance, just to name a few techniques. One of my favourite things to do is use dialogue in my poems. This is not very common, but I love doing that. The dialogue is not as obvious in Captain Coach because they haven't used inverted commas, but it adds to the conversational intimacy of the poem, allowing the reader to feel as if they are eavesdropping on the conversation. However, I haven't unpacked all the poetic techniques used in these two poems because my focus in this video is on the idea of using your personal experience or observations to create a moment of engagement with the universal elements of the human experience, causing the reader to engage more deeply with the message at the heart of the poem. Starting with the personal is a great way to give your poem a powerful authenticity, but it doesn't have to remain there. I believe the best poems move on from the personal to the universal, just as we all do when we move from childhood to adulthood and gain a broader perspective of the world and deeper understanding of the experiences and challenges that face human beings as we relate to each other and help to construct a society that reflects the best of our humanity. I hope you will think about this as you are writing your poetry, because I truly believe it will take your poetry to the next level once you become aware of the impact you can have on your reader. We live in an age where "it's all about me" has become the catch cry, but it really isn't. It's really about us. While each poem we write has a specific message or multiple messages, we poets share a common purpose. We desire to encourage and inspire each other to be people who reflect on what it means to be human, and hope our poetry helps us to do that and reaches out to the wider community to share in that conversation. Well, I hope these ideas have been helpful to you. This video was made as an illustration to a response on the Q&A page of my website. As well as answering questions about poetry writing, I have many other videos commenting on poetic themes and techniques which you may be interested in that you can find on my YouTube channel, Julie Bright, Australian Poet. I would love you to join me again for more poetry pointers, and would also love to receive an email from you with any questions you may have about the art of poetry writing. I am very happy to respond to them and upload them to my Q&A page of my website. And my website is, as you can see on this slide, Benedictus Publishing. Until next time you join me, ciao for now.